Well, last Sunday I encouraged us to be in line with the part of our statement of faith as Shadow Rock, we call it our covenant, that says our task together demands a comprehensive view of life, always pointed intentionally to the future. And this means that we embrace the entire mixed bag of beauties and horrors, joys and tragedies straight on, and with both hands. There was a beer commercial a long time ago. I grew up, and I remember it was saying that something about all the gusto, right? Was it grab all the gusto? What was it? Go for the gusto. Thank you, beer drinkers among us, for go for the gusto. And that's what I'm saying, that if we were to think about the intensity of that commercial, go for the gusto, so it is with life, the whole entire mixed bag with both hands and straight on. Now, I want to go a little bit deeper on the part of the mixed bag of life about loss and grief, that side of life. Dr. Carl Albrecht, a PhD in psychology, wrote an article asserting that there are only 5 basic fears out of which almost all the other so-called fears are manufactured. And these are extinction, fear of annihilation, a fear of ceasing to exist. Okay? The fear of mutilation, the fear of losing any part of our precious bodily structure. The fear of loss of autonomy, the fear of being immobilized, paralyzed, restricted, enveloped, overwhelmed, entrapped, imprisoned, smothered, or otherwise controlled by circumstances beyond our control. The fourth fear is separation, the fear of abandonment, rejection, and loss of connectedness. And the fifth fear is ego death, the fear of humiliation, shame, or any other mechanism of profound self-disapproval that threatens the loss of integrity of the self. I think we can distill these 5 down to 1. That is, a fear of profound loss. Every one of the 5 mentioned have in common a condition of having something and the fear of losing it. Loss of life, loss of love, loss of body integrity, loss of self, loss of personality integrity, loss of belonging, loss of capacity and competency, and loss of agency. I think the story of the Garden of Eden and the fall of humankind is a metaphor for helping us to understand that the basic challenge of being human is taking responsibility for all the losses that come with being human. As the story goes, when Adam and Eve were kicked out of the garden, they lost everything. Living in a state of loss is the human condition. If living in a state of loss is the human condition, and the task before us demands a comprehensive view of life, then grief and lamentation is part of an appropriate response to the way life is. I have found Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, her insights to be profound on this point. We have heard about the stages of grief. They include denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. We've experienced these stages. It is an emotional process that no one is exempt. It is the emotional and spiritual process of loss. It doesn't matter if it's a sudden death of a tragic accident or the slower death of a terminal illness. Our losses and grief are not limited to the death of loved ones. Losses and grieving also includes transitions in our lives, changes in jobs, losses in finance, graduating from high school. Some people never get over that one. Marital separation and divorce, downsizing from the family home of 30 years to assisted living apartments, retirement, marriage, an injury that limits your mobility, a move to a new community. All of these things involve a loss. In all of these things of life, we will experience denial and anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. And while the stages of grief in theory present themselves as a straight line process, it is never that simple. It is more of a process that is characterized by looping and steps forward and backward. Grief can become complicated, and people can get stuck. When we sing the song that proclaims we are companions on a journey, that is a big part of the journey. In our culture, it is a tendency to individualize and personalize everything we hear. Blind Willie Johnson was a blues singer. He was blinded as a child. He died a pauper in 1945 after living in the ruins of his burnt-down house. He expressed deep sorrow in his song, "Lord, I just can't keep from crying." One lyric went like this: "When my heart's full of sorrow and my eyes are filled with tears, Lord, I just can't keep from crying sometimes." Let me share another poetic note. Is there no healing balm in Gilead? Is there no physician here? Why has the health of the daughter of my people not been restored? Oh, that my head were waters and my eyes a fountain of tears, that I might weep day and night for the slain daughter of my people. Oh, that I had in the desert a wayfarer's lodging place, that I might leave my people and go away from them. They're too miserable. They're too sad. They're too broken. I can't stand it anymore. I gotta get out. Maybe some of you are feeling that way about this sermon right now. This was the poet Jeremiah speaking about the time of conquest and exile. And in the time of conquest and exile, when soldiers would go through the streets and they would break down the doors and they would kill people and they would separate families, governments separating families, breaking people's hearts, devastating life. There were, in fact, great personal losses. And this prophetic poetry from Jeremiah is about national loss, national grief, national lamentation. We are quick to acknowledge the wisdom of Kubler-Ross for us individually. That is, for us to heal, we must embrace the stages of grief. We must go through those stages, and we're willing to go through these stages with each other. We are ready to acknowledge how necessary that is in order for healing to happen for us as individuals. However, we are slow and even resistant to apply such wisdom to our collective and national grief. Every time there is a protest and a rally, underlying the message is the energy of the emotional process of grief. Our nation is grieving a loss of innocence. Our nation is grieving a loss of trust in institutions. Black Lives Matter and #MeToo movements are expressions of anger and bargaining and saying, finally, no more. White nationalists claim losses and fears of being replaced. So in addition to just being plain ignorant, they are also in denial and angry. Political leadership is depressed and paralyzed and stuck in the stage of bargaining when they should be leading through acceptance and visioning. The grief we see unfolding on the national level is the same grief we are experiencing in our local community. Here at Shadow Rock, we are grieving not just the past glory of our church, but we are also grieving the world that fed the past glory of the church. As individual members, we are all over the continuum of the stages of grief. But as a group and your leadership, we are moving forward. I would say we are no longer in denial. We are angry, bargaining, and depressed. As a congregation, we are not at a place of acceptance yet. Some of us are at acceptance, which is not the same as surrender and resignation. We are working too hard for our acceptance to be reduced to such negative terms. How do I know the quality and positivity of our acceptance? It is in the phrase we use in our covenant. Our task together demands a comprehensive view of life, always pointed intentionally to the future. This is acceptance, characterized by hope. Hope is often confused with wishing, especially this time of the year. Wishing is the theme of Hallmark Christmas movies. Hope is the theme for the people of God. Wishing is the work of children, but hope is the work of responsible and free human beings. Wishing allows us to be children, forever wishing upon the stars and staying young forever in Neverland. Hope is different. Another poet I love very much, Heintzelman, wrote about hope. And she said this: there is discomfort in hope. As soon as I plant a tiny seed of hope, anxiety begins to build. Hope is a magnet that pulls me toward the future, into the great void of the unknown. Hope is dangerous. However, hopelessness is deadly. The slide toward death is slippery with regret, missed opportunities, judgment, and resignation. It is not a difficult climb because it is a downhill journey. Hope and life are always an uphill climb. Yes, Hope is dangerous and even profoundly disturbing. It puts our butts firmly into the seat of expectation, and expectation in turn leads to anxiety. We think hope is some passive thing out there in the future, pulling us, but always out of reach. We misunderstand the pull, and we misunderstand hope. It is always calling us out of passivity. It is calling us to prepare, to make ready, and to grab our walking sticks and move. Because staying where we are is stagnation, hopelessness, and death. And so you see, these times together as family, they're all connected. We'll get out of our seats next Sunday, proclaim the vision of life and love that Jesus had as King of our lives, and we will move because we will decorate. We will prepare. We are being called out of passivity into the season of hope. And so, we are a hopeful people. Hear the wisdom of our tradition. Hear the wisdom of ancient poets. Yes, there's loss, but there is always